Problem 3, we get into section 7.2 where we have kind of a combination of inverse and not inverse functions. So first thing, sine of 4 pi over 3. Well, then we know that that's 4 pi over 3 is in the third quadrant, so we know that that's negative. Negative rad 3 over 2 is the value of the sine of 4 pi over 3. And then we're looking for the angle at which the cosine is negative rad 3 over 2. Well, again, cosine gets restricted to, inverse cosine gets restricted to 0 to pi. So on the interval from 0 to pi, I've got this inverse cosine here. Where is the cosine negative radical 3 over 2? Well, that's going to be 5 pi over 6. All right, and then number 4. We're looking for first, when we have multiple sets of parentheses or like a function like this, or an expression like this embedded in another one, but just figure that one out first. Figure out the inside of the parentheses first and then the outside. So what are we looking for? Inverse tangent of 1. So what angle is the tangent of that angle equal to 1? And again, it has to be between between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. The tangent is 1 at pi over 4. So now we're looking for the secant of pi over 4. And the secant of pi over 4 is the reciprocal of the cosine. The cosine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2. Um, so the secant would be 2 over radical 2, and if we rationalize the denominator, we get 2 radical 2 over, when you multiply radical 2 by itself, you just get 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and we just get radical 2. Simplified fully. All right, number 5. So a little bit more work to do here on number 5. So I like to just remind myself that's an angle. Inverse cosine of negative radical 3 over 3 is an angle. So the cosine of the angle is negative. Okay, so if the cosine of the angle is negative, and we have to put that, let's see, put that in the second quadrant. So the angle's got to be in the second quadrant because inverse cosine has to be in between 0 and pi. And so we go, let's see, let's build this the right way. So the cosine of the angle is the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse, so negative radical 3 over 3. And therefore we have to figure out, and I know we can't have a negative, the length of a side of a triangle can't be negative, but I like to label it as a negative, indicating really the coordinates of that point right there. So that helps me to remember to always include that negative when I'm figuring out another value, which we'll be doing here in a second. But we have to figure out the length of that vertical leg of this right triangle. And so we're just going to use the Pythagorean theorem. We can go negative radical 3 squared or just radical 3 squared. You're going to get the same thing. Plus, let's say a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? And so negative radical 3 squared, again, same thing as radical 3 squared. That's going to be 3. 3 plus b squared is equal to 3 squared is 9. Subtracting 3 from both sides, we get b squared equals 6. Taking the square root of both sides, we get b equals, now normally solving an equation like that, we'd get plus or minus radical 6, but because that radical 6 is the length of a side of a triangle, we don't need plus or minus, it's just going to be one value, and if you go up, it's going to be positive. Okay, so that gets us our lengths of our sides of our triangle, and now we just have to figure out the cotangent of the angle. Now the cotangent of the angle is going to be the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse, or sorry, adjacent over opposite. So remember, SOHCAHTOA, tangent is the opposite over adjacent, so therefore cotangent will be the adjacent. So cotangent of the angle is the adjacent leg, negative radical 3, over the opposite leg. And so a couple different ways we could do this. If you write that entire 3 over, so radical 3 over radical 6 can be written as radical 3/6, and 3/6 is 1/2. So we're going to keep going down here. It's a negative, don't forget that negative. Radical 1 is 1. over radical 2, and then just rationalize our denominator, and we get negative radical 2 over rad 2 times rad 2 is 2. So we have negative radical 2 over 2. That's the one that takes the longest on this entire quiz. All right, we're at the 5-minute mark, so let's go ahead and make a new video.